All right, good evening, everyone. I think I will call this special budget meeting to order, the fourth of our 4 nights of budget presentations. And we have Councilors Carpenter and Hightower in the room, and we have Councilor McGee and Bergman, Jay on Zoom, and we maybe joined by others. We are expecting others this evening. We have on the agenda to start with hearing from the public. If there are any members of the public that would like to speak at this meeting, any leaders on that. Councilors online able to hear us okay?
Yes.
Not see either member, anybody raising their hand to be recognized.
Okay. Could Councilor McGee or Bergman or Jenkins, someone just confirm you're hearing us okay?
I can hear you. If you can't hear me, then you got a problem.
Yeah, I can hear you.
The sun is off there.
Oh, okay, we got a thumbs up from Counselor.
Okay, but we couldn't hear them. Can you,
So can you hear me?
now we
Now
can.
we can.
Oh,
I can hear you. I can
ours.
hear you. Same here.
All right.
You can always hear.
There is no public comment at this time, so we will go to the first presentation. And the first presentation is Mayor's Office budget, and my Chief Staff, Jordan Riddell, is here, and we'll lead us through the Mayor's Office budget. Go ahead.
Great, so as Catherine is getting the slides up, our first slide is our Mayor's Office organizational chart. The Mayor's Office has 4 people in it, including the mayor. Most of our budget is staff costs.
Happy to report that Council may not be aware of this yet, as of for first time in too long, we have all 4 positions filled now. And with the arrival this week of Erin
Stetzner.
Stetzner.
It was her 3rd day today, and sure everyone will get to know her. She's great. So that's our organizational chart, and then again, so our Mayor's Office budget is mostly staff costs, and we have level funded our operating budget. For accounting purposes, we've slightly shifted around some of the items within our general operating budget. We had more broad categories previously, and the clerk treasurer's office has wanted us to be more specific about how we're billing things for our operating line. So there are some slight adjustments within that level funded budget. And I am happy to take questions.
That's the most concise presentation.
Well, yeah, I won the shortest presentation prize.
Yes.
The floor is open for council questions if there are any.
The only question is, looking at the budget, this is the highest budget that it has been on the expense side in several years. I assume that's referring to it not being fully staffed.
That's right. Well, it's that, and also it's our budget is similar to FY22. So I'm seeing our staff costs went down by $80 from 2022, and our general operating budget is the same.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the actuals.
And there
You're
was
right.
some increase in
It
the
was
general
still not
operating budget
increased.
from 2021 to 2022, and in 2021, you'll recall, we cut a lot of our operating expenses across the city, and we cut a lot of our mayor's office general operating budget in reflection of the COVID impacts.
Further comments or questions at this point? Okay, we will close out the mayor's office budget, and next up, a significantly more interesting one is Burlington Electric Department. That was the first one. Reflection of where all the action happens on climate change efforts and a lot of it. Welcome to Team BD. Happy to turn the mic over to, you don't actually have a mic up. But, welcome Darren, welcome Team BD. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening, joined by my colleagues, Emily Byrne, Finance Director, Maria Cassidy, Emily Stebbins-Willock, Paul Alexander, who you all know, I believe. Mike Kenrick, I think, is on Zoom as well. And pleased to be here to present our FY23 budget, and we will also discuss our FY23 rate proposal. The rate proposal is scheduled to come to the board on June 6th and the City Council. So just want to walk through that as well. So if folks have questions. The context for this budget, we, as everybody are experiencing high inflation in terms of our supply chain. It's definitely affecting us. In addition, energy prices are quite volatile, and fuel prices are quite volatile. So that obviously has ripple effects throughout Burlington Electric. As everyone knows, we had a first rate change in 12 years in FY22, 7.5%. Our actual demonstrated need at the Public Utility Commission was 11.8%. So there was a gap in terms of what we asked for last year relative to what our business need actually was. We have a couple other factors here. The net zero revenue bond is a key source of capital for us. It was a great development that passed, and we are utilizing it as a part of this budget. And I will say that on the positive side for us, we've had incredibly strong performance from the McNeil Generating Station and our other renewable plants. And in a very high price environment where if we did not have renewable energy, we would be facing significant market impacts from the increased price of natural gas. We are insulating our customers from those impacts because of our renewable portfolio. So we're pleased that happened during FY22, and we have projections to be able to do that again in FY23. Next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Emily for a few slides, and then I'll come back.
Great. So the operating revenue for the department this year is going to be $63.6 million. It's about 5% higher than our budget. So it does include a rate increase effective August 1st of 3.95%. Really, as Darren alluded to, in response to inflation and some uncontrollable costs that are coming our way. It does include increased kilowatt sales to customers as a result of sort of the COVID-19 pandemic effects, lessening over time. So shifting in the use of electricity within the city, and increased renewable energy credit sales. Our operating expenses are $64.5 million, about 1% higher than in FY2022. This is sort of upward pressures that we're facing result in increased wood fuel costs at McNeil of about $1 million, primarily driven by the increased cost of diesel, which the folks that bring the wood chips into the plant are having to pay at the pump right now. Additionally, our state and regional transmission costs are up by $869,000. Our purchase power budget is reduced by $2.6 million. That's due to the anticipated higher energy forwards that they are unprecedented and higher than we've ever seen in the past. So that is some good news on the budget front for BED. There is an increase in the city indirect allocation of $134,000. And our budget does include an additional FTE reallocated from contractual services to provide project management and business analyst support as we upgrade some of our IT systems in the department. Our interest expense is 30% higher than our FY22 budget, driven primarily by the net zero energy revenue bond. And our net income is at $1.23 million, about $242,000 higher than it was in FY22. We are including the energy assistance pilot rate. We're seeking approval from the Public Utility Commission for approval of that rate. This was discussed last month, this meeting. It will be a 12.5 discount for customers that qualify in FY23, and it will be funded in the FY23 budget through the ARPA carry forward funds that were approved last month. This puts our debt service cover ratio at 3.91 for the year, an adjusted debt service coverage ratio of 1.26, and we'll have 104 days cash on hand.
I just want to mention the adjusted debt service coverage ratio being projected at that number is significant for us. It had been lower during the pandemic timeframe, significantly lower. We've been committed to bringing that back up, and this number is much more in the frame of reference we would want for our A rating. So we are going to, this is a slide that BED has presented a few times over the last couple of years, sort of demonstrating the savings that were implemented back in 2016 through 2019, and sort of the trajectory as a result of those being lower than we were anticipated, had they been on the same track based on 2016 projections and 10-year growth rate. And finally, we do have $9.1 million of capital investment in this budget, about 11% net of the utility plant service. So it assumes the $3 million, the general obligation bond that the city has historically done for BED capital improvements, and we're anticipating spending about $5.7 million from the 2020 net zero revenue bond. It includes EV chargers, fleet vehicles, purchase of Belco equity, distribution and IT system. And then obviously, as part of our efforts, we're continuing to focus on net zero energy. Will continue to be 100% renewable. We will continue to offer all of the strong incentive programs that we have. We have in the budget doubled funding for electrification incentives, as was part of our revenue bond plan, so that more customers can take advantage of those. We are, I think we mentioned one position that we're looking at. We are also repurposing 2 vacant positions in energy services and sustainability to have an increased focus on net zero capacity for our staff. We're investing in chargers, as Emily mentioned. We're planning to replace 2 of our fleet gas-powered trucks with EVs. We have an initiative to convert our line crews, pole saws and chainsaws to electric, which actually came from our line crews. We're very appreciative of their leadership on that. We're converting the gas turbine to biodiesel, which was a revenue bond project, and all the other initiatives here continue our progress on net zero relative for the FY23 budget. Those are our budget slides. I'm going to walk through the rate slides as well, just because they're so intertwined with what we're trying to do with the budget. FY23, as Emily mentioned, we're proposing a 3.95% rate change. I think we communicated to the council that we were anticipating a 4.9% rate change. We were able to lower that a bit, again, thanks to the strong energy prices and the expected strong performance of McNeil and our renewable energy plants. We always want to hold a rate change as low as possible for our customers. We can go to the next slide. We have this period of 12 years. We're very proud not to have a rate change at all. Our trajectory now is such that I think we need more regular rate changes, probably annual, but our commitment is to try to hold them much more moderate than the 7.5% we had last year. We're proposing the 3.95 this year. We're hoping to get to a point where we'll even be more moderate than that. In the current inflation environment, I think that 3.95 is more reasonable, and also it kind of makes up for the gap we had last year in terms of what our need was relative to what we had asked for at the PUC. Next slide is just going to show our rate change. We're the bottom line in dark green there, relative to some other different rising costs, and inflation is in red. This is only through February of 2022, so it doesn't include March and April, but even with the proposed 3.95 rate change, we're still well below the rate of inflation over the period of time between 2010 and today. And I think if we had gasoline or natural gas or any other fuel on this chart, you would see it jumping significantly as well. So just to give a sense of context there. In terms of residential rates, even with the proposed increase, we will still be significantly lower than both the Vermont utility average and the New England utility average. And for our low-income customers who are on the energy assistance program rate, there's a line in blue at the bottom there. They're actually going to be better off, all things equal, prior to the two rate cases. If you look at the 7.5 and the 3.95, and you add the bill impacts of those, and you add the discount that we're providing, they're going to be better off than they would have been back in 2020. And I'll go into that in a little more detail in a moment. In terms of commercial industrial, we're a little higher after the rate proposal than the Vermont average, lower than the New England average. I should say that the projections here in dotted lines on the Vermont and New England average are just projections. They may actually be higher given some of the cost pressures we're seeing. So it may well be that we're closer to even with the Vermont utility average once we see actual rate proposals from the other utilities. But for the moment, this is the best data that we have. In terms of total rates, we remain again below Vermont, below New England average, even after the proposed 3.95. And the next chart, next slide, just shows all of those different pieces. BED current rates in blue, BED proposed rates in green. As you can see, we're still lower residential than any other state and the Vermont utility average. We're a little closer to mid-tier on commercial industrial and still in the bottom third in terms of cost overall. In terms of bill impacts, which is what customers actually experience for a residential customer, average customer bill, this would be about a $3.10 increase once implemented. For our small general commercial customers, which make up the bulk of our commercial customers, about 2/3 or more, it'd be a $3.50 bill increase. And then our last slide is, again, focused on the energy assistance pilot program. This shows the cumulative impact for customers participating in that program from the two rate changes would be $8.95. However, the discount we're providing of 12.5% starting in July is $10.65. So they're actually going to see a benefit, a net benefit as a result of that program. We are hoping and anticipating to have at least 800 to 1,500 customers sign up for the program. We base that on the participation rates that Vermont Gas and GMP experience in their programs. And we are continuing with the 185% of federal poverty level for participation. And we are glad to answer any questions that the board may have.
Board's open for questions. That's correct.
On the rates, large multifamily buildings typically include electricity. And there was a sort of a discussion on some differentiated rates around that. Can you refresh my memory on that?
Yes, I think if you are, it depends. So multifamily of a certain size would potentially be on the residential rate if it was smaller. If it's a larger building, it would potentially be considered a commercial customer. You know, in terms of how they, they meter differently in some cases. Some cases there's a house meter that covers the electric use for the building, and in a number of cases they're separately metered for the different units. So it varies based on the setup.
Right. A large multifamily, you're not seeing separate meters, are you?
I think in a lot of rental,
It's like sub-meters or?
yeah, you have separate meters in order to send. I think the traditional reason was to send an energy conservation
Yeah.
signal and be able to track data for each unit.
So we will accept that on a billing basis?
Yes. Yes.
And in that case, would the customers that be on a residential risk? Right?
I don't know. Yeah, in terms of, go ahead.
I generally speaking, with the caveat here, and that there's a lot of different situations of how things are metered. My understanding is that an apartment building will have a meter for each apartment. That's usually on the RS rate, residential.
Okay.
And then sometimes there can be what is called a house meter for like the outside light, the
Yeah.
hallway light, the laundry in the basement, the common spaces. And then depending on how much flows through that house meter, the usage there could bump up to be high enough into a small commercial rate, not residential. But again, that's between the landlords and the tenant on how that expense is covered. Which again, can vary.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but is that separate meters per apartment, is that being encouraged in terms of the building of more multifamily?
My understanding is yes.
Okay.
That the general trend has been largely towards individually metered units. Yes.
My sense that even more so is we're seeing more and more of the industry shift over to these split systems.
Yes, yeah.
That's right there.
Are rates reviewed by two to the council, or do they just come straight to the board?
They're reviewed and recommended by our commission. And the commission actually met yesterday, voted unanimously to recommend the budget and the rate.
Any further questions from the councilors or mine? It's not here, so,
I have a question, sorry.
okay, that's okay.
Thank you, Darren and team, for being here. It seems that I missed the organizational chart of the staffing at BED. Have you provided that here?
We have that, we can provide it. It wasn't part of our slides, but I'm happy to send it by separate email if you're interested.
Yeah, I think it will be always valuable to also understand that dynamic. Also, maybe next time to include it in the. I also wanted to ask you a question specific to burying utilities underground. How many lines have we buried the past 2 years, and what is the plan as part of your budget?
I will see if Munir wants to comment on the undergrounding.
In the last 2 years, we really haven't done much with underground. Pandemic. For the next 5 years, most of the undergrounding we're doing is we'll be probably on replacing the underground system on College Street. We're doing some there, part of the Champlain Parkway, there's some undergrounding, but we don't have any specific project on underground lines. In the downtown area, there's, I think the project's moving ahead, where we're undergrounding, I believe, part of Bank Street. But that's part of the downtown area project.
Yep. As part of the Champlain Parkway, I understood, I was told that there are opportunities there, and I'm hearing that there is it?
Yes, we're undergrounding some of our lines as part of the Champlain Parkway.
Okay. Wonderful.
Oh.
Right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any further hands online or in the room, so PET team go, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And next presentation is racial equity inclusion and belonging.
Go for it. I was getting a little eager. I thought water was done. We're really excited. So it's the water budget.
Chapin's already got to go, so. Go for it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vicky Kilmaivan. I am the acting director of the REIB since March. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and it's been a great ride. And looking forward to being able to continue this budget going forward. So basically, REIB has been around for 6 years. And it is a department that is focused on engagement, facilitation, education through policy and through training. And it's really looking at systemic racism and equity and how we can be able to promote more opportunities for life. The next slide shows that this is the strategic roadmap, which shows some area of focus that we as a department has focused on. And this strategic roadmap was created by a comprehensive engagement process where we had BIPOC listening sessions and we also had focus groups. And so these are the domains that we are looking at when it comes to the work that REIB is focused on. some of the functional areas, the work that we've done our key areas really has been culture and events, public policy, public health, and also training and education. And that has been in the form of training city staff and commissioners and counselors in anti-racism practices, and also being able to learn about the history of systemic racism. We also, as a city, declared racism as a public health, as you all know, so that's going to be definitely a key area that we're investing on and continuing to look at public policy and also the ways that we are really providing equitable support around public health. And as far as culture and events, it's a key area because that's a part of belonging, a part of the inclusion of being able to be represented, and the department does events and also gatherings where we are constantly being able to expose other cultures and other BIPOC experiences. And the big one, of course, is Juneteenth that's coming up. This is our organizational chart that was approved last September. And there are some vacancies. And I wanted to point out too that the trainers last year were limited service. And this year, going forward, we really want to invest, like I said, in training. So those are going to continue, which last year we weren't sure. So we're really excited about that in developing a more robust training for the city and also being able to sustain it long term. And I think if you do go back, since I had mentioned the public health equity work, we will continue to really focus on having that position filled, and the rest of the positions that are not filled, that we will wait for the new director to be able to, at their discretion, fill the positions. So this is our budget from last year. A big area was, of course, growing the department and staffing. We also had done a lot of work around consulting services in the CA, for example, the CNN report and also the strategic plan. And there was also a lot of money that went into buying computers for the staff, and also in addition furnishing, since it is in a department. So those are our areas. And I think that there was it wasn't added, but I wanted to point out the public art there. That was a one-time fee, but I just pulled it apart so that we can see it as a separate thing, because that's not going to be a continued project.
Where is Dewey Park?
Dewey Park is
Right in front of my
Oh.
It's a newer park.
yes.
As in
Hopefully-
John Dewey, where did it come from?
I believe it is after the Dewey the Educator. And the public art piece has not been installed yet, although the process for selecting the artist is advanced, and I think an announcement about the
Monday. Yeah, you'll get to see the design.
I'm not sure exactly where that was in the process, so it's a lot of progress has been made. It's nice.
And we'll find out more about Dewey before Monday. It's a good homework assignment.
Yeah, it's a really great sculpture. So this is the proposed budget for FY23. There has been some shifts in it. Of course, the focus too is like still on staffing and retaining our staff that we have currently, and also retaining the work that REIB is looking forward to doing. We did shift some in order to have the trainers be another year, to go on another year. We did shift some of our funding from professional consultants and also the operating budget. Again, those it was taken because they were out of the one-time fees of furniture, and also some of the work that we did in consultants are not going to happen. And Yeah, I love this quote, without the interchange in yourself, there can't be any outer change, and you know, we all have to do this together.
Thank you, Dave. Councilor Ida.
Sorry to make you go back to the presentation, but could you talk through the org chart and which of those positions are full-time and which are part-time? Sorry about that. I should have asked on this slide. Okay.
So, yeah, we could say all the manager positions are full-time. And we did hire a digital and also event planner, full-time also. And of course, the public health positions are, and the directors, thank you. My position before this was the, before I became the interim, was a supply diversity analyst. That's a full-time position, and all the racial equity trainers are limited service. We never hired the data analysts for that, and so that's the scope. So basically, everybody at the top under the director and the director staff is full-time.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but the trainers are full-time also. They're just
Yes, they're limited
Everybody
service,
on
yeah.
the org chart is full-time. It's just for trainers are limited service.
That's her. On the training, which was great. How, what's your target next year? I mean, you did a big batch of staff, and you probably got another big batch of staff, but will you be going beyond city employees or city affiliates? What's your next target range?
Well, we still are currently training city staff. We did do a invite to some more specifically the BIPOC leadership cohort. And we are working on doing a module with HR for seasonals, so they don't have to go through the whole 8 weeks, but you know, they still can benefit from the racial equity training. And in the fall, it's the police fire cohort, and then we're always hiring, so we'll probably do another round of like staff again, like white cohorts, like BIPOC. We've been some.
There are still also some, or maybe department heads who were busy with other things and didn't get their employees signed up as quickly as they should. Like I still have some white staff who were not able to, they weren't in the first cohort, and now there isn't enough space in the second cohort. I think Chapin and some of the other department heads are in that as well. So I think it's because we wanted to keep the cohorts at reasonable sizes that we did not make it through as we might have originally thought all of the white employees in this first cohort or even this second cohort. So just getting through all of the staff we have now is taking considerably longer, and that is, it's like obviously we are continuing to bring in new staff all the time.
Because the trainers also have to have some downtime to plan too, so
Sure.
That's a factor. Also, in addition, the in-person is very valuable, but we're finding, looking at different curriculum to continue the work too. And one of the things is looking at a racial equity toolkit for the city departments also.
It'd be great if we could figure out a way to even get a little more of it into the community, understand staff's first priority, but you know, it was really well done. And just thinking out a little bit, I think, for the community to understand it, it would be good for them to participate, even if they were modified or you know, there were small groups or some such thing. They just encourage us to think of it, because I think it would be great support for the department if they could see the Delta training.
And we're really pleased with it, and that's one of the reasons why it was a push to keep them on, and not just 1 year.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of support from city staff and people benefited from it. So
I just want to give a shout out to Whit, who was a huge advocate for keeping the trainers on, and I think has a vision of kind of what you're talking about, Councilor Carpenter, and I think we can work together very well with you and the commission others to help realize that.
I think if the community sees it,
Yes.
they will appreciate it, and sometimes it's hard to articulate it. We haven't participated in it. and felt it.
Okay, Councilor Jang has his camera on. Would you like to be recognized, Councilor Jang?
Please, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Pat, for the presentation, and was wondering if you can go back to the strategic planning roadmap slide, please.
Sure can. Have to find it.
I think it's the first one. Before
Thank you.
Thank you for finding it. You know, I feel like it was a comprehensive document, and these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. And I just I'm interested to learning about, you know, what is next from here, since it was commissioned, created, what has been done in terms of action about this? Maybe, I don't know if you can answer it, but who can answer that, please?
Well, the work has been done around these domains, like education, of course, we're talking about the training piece of training our staff. And also that is something that we are looking into metrics so that it's not something that is a one-time thing and there's outcomes that we can measure. And other areas around health, of course, with the public health, racism as a public health is a big area. We are going into the other domains, but to say that the department is a new department too, and me being an interim director also, I'm hoping that the new director can help really continue to expand these other areas of focus. And I'm sure we will, like, because they all cross each other anyways too. That help answer in one more detail.
Councilor Jang, you're muted.
If there are additional, you know, because I understand that you are new to this, and it doesn't seem also that, you know, racism as public health emergency is, you know, was done before even this strategic planning was commissioned, you know. And also, I think if you look at the strategic planning, the roadmap, basically it has tangible, and also most of the time it also requires, you know, some funding for each, and those recommendations, it has some type of funding associated with it. But as part of your budget, I don't know, because I just haven't heard what will be done. What part of the budget will be actually to implement those recommendations?
There was $50,000, I believe, that was put into the public health work as far as operating, and the empowerment fund also is a fund that is community support and has been in the past year been used to help with some of the public health work in recovery, racial equity recovery through grants of giving to food insecurity, and also to support like housing and other programming. I think that it is really up to the new director. Like I understand what you're saying, but for me, I would be hesitant to say this is what we should be doing going forward, because I am the interim, and I believe that the new director coming in would have to reassess what's been done, and also I would recommend them to do a somewhat with a retreat too, with like the staff to really assess what the work's being done and what around the roadmap can be done, given the budget and the area of focus. But currently we are trying to keep up with our partners in the work we've done with Marielle and Nyla, with the public and looking at racism as a public health. We don't have that position yet. So that's why that's a critical position to fill so that we keep up those relationships.
I appreciate you and the work that you do. Thank you. And I feel like I'll follow up with Jordan and the mayor about next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. I'll just add it. We did provide a written update to Councilor Jang's committee this week that has some additional detail in it. Certainly, the major focus of the department as it currently stands is on the continued training effort, as Pitt described, on the Juneteenth celebration, which is just over a month away, which is has expanded from last year into a weekend-long event, and there's a great deal of activity happening with that currently. There, in terms of those other strategic initiatives, there certainly will be progress over the year ahead with both the housing and the economic sectors listed there in the roadmap. Pitt has a lot of personal involvement in each of those initiatives. She has taken over, frankly, the housing initiative. We certainly were hopeful would be farther along by now. I mentioned it first in the State of the City a year ago, and there was some momentum building towards an announcement of new programs there. Certainly the transition in the recent months, we've lost a bit of momentum. On the other hand, there's some very exciting news last week, which is that in the final flurry of activity, there was a significant new monies appropriated for a first generation homeownership program from the state. First generation homeownership is really aligns very closely with how we have been thinking of the kind of clear legal route to pursue a homeownership initiative that would benefit BIPOC households. And it's quite exciting to think that between city funds and these now available state funds that we will be able to roll out something new that we haven't seen before over the next year. Pitt has taken over that project. Obviously, she's pulling in a lot of directions now as the acting director, but the vision is that she will, she that personally has a lot of commitment to it, that she'll stay with once a new director has been named. We are moving towards naming a new director at this point. Karen Durfee is leading that search process, and it's something that was just recently agreed to, and she's just beginning with that work now. There'll be more announcements within the weeks ahead. It will be posted in the next couple of weeks here. And then Pitt was initially hired before it was known that she would need to be in this role for this procurement work with the CAO's office to look at whether there's more we can do in the city's contracting to create economic opportunity for BIPOC businesses, and that work. It was only a matter of weeks before being pulled into this new role, but as she's able to transition back out of this full management role, and that's another thing. There's clear commitment and assignment of responsibility for it. I support what Pitt articulated there, that certainly I think it's critical that we give some space and authority to the new director coming in to assess, take ownership of the department and help set this, certainly build off the work that's been done, but also help set a new strategic direction going forward. And there's a limit to how far we go until that happens. The written report spoke to all the things that these city initiatives since the declaration of the public health emergency, and happy to speak to them more if there's interest in that now. But it's appreciated Councilor Jang's question. I think it's a good summary of a very substantial amount of activity that has happened and financial investment that has happened since that declaration in July of 2020. Councilor Hightower.
You answered my first question, which is if we posted the position yet, but then I guess the follow-up question is like, why haven't we waited?
so long to this position?
It's been, just 2 months now. There was a lot of course, it wasn't just the departure of the director, there was the departure of some managers as well. We had considerable work to do to kind of work with the remaining staff, stabilize the department, and assess the direction forward and how a search would be led. And we've done all that in 2 months. We're now ready. Councilor Carpenter.
I know that in the short run, we're using CARES Act money and ARPA, looking at ways to get this more in the structural budget. But I don't see any state funding, and I'm just wondering, it seems to me that the region in particular will benefit from all of these activities. So I just hope we can, I know like specifically like probably housing, there is state money, but I'm more thinking about the build out and education and empowerment and culture, which will benefit more than just the city of Burlington. Editorial comment that we really need to work on, I think getting the state to contribute in some fashion. The suburban towns can't and won't take an initiative of this depth, and they will benefit.
I think you're 100% right, Councilor Carpenter. I appreciate your frequent focus on the regional opportunities. I agree, and we have taken some steps to the way. One of the reasons that one of the reasons I had confidence and still have confidence that we have a model for the kind of progress that and cross multi-agency, cross-sectoral progress that we need to make to truly address racism as a public health emergency, and what I was hopeful about when at that proud moment for the city when we made that declaration in July of 2020 is that we have this over the last decade, this model of collaboration among many different agencies and with community staff with this, which has been this really Chittenden County-wide effort to address the opioid crisis involve dozens of organizations. This effort should be even bigger. And we did get more than 30 organizations to sign on to that and commit to that. And you're quite right. If we there has been follow through to the commitments that were made in July of 2020. Before the leadership transition, an application was made to start to realize some of that regional funding. An application was made to the SHEEP program that the hospital funds, the community health impact community impact program. It's a $100,000 application to get a multi-year commitment. That decision on that is still pending. It has been impacted by the leadership transition, but that is one example of how we're going to pursue, have already started to pursue, and I think can ultimately be successful getting other funding. Similarly, with the passage of this year's budget just last week by the state legislature, there are many new programs that are going to be coming down from Montpelier that we have new grant writing and pursuing capacity, as we've talked about recently. And this is one of the areas that has been communicated to the new grants team that we want to focus on is on public health. There's a significant amount of federal and state money that has become available, and we should be able to get some assistance with this. Okay, I'm looking online and not seeing further hands at this point, not seeing further in the room, so close this section. Thank you, Pitt, and thank you for stepping up and serving in this period. Now we'll let Chapin come to the desk here. Welcome, Chapin.
Great.
Water, wastewater, stormwater, and then we'll go straight into the traffic presentation, which will also be.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we have Division Director Megan Moyer here who's going to lead the presentation for you this evening. We're excited to be with you tonight. Megan.
Hi all, thanks for allowing me to come in remotely. Catherine, if you want to start the presentation, that would be great. I can see it. It's not quite starting on my side. There we go. Okay, so just from a big high level overview, the sort of principles that I have been trying to employ since I took over leadership of the Water Resources Division in 2016. I think we do a little bit better every single year. Those principles, I sort of think of it as a three-legged stool, right? And sometimes if we focus too much on any one of these, we end up with a two-legged stool. So it's really critical that we do all three of these things. On the financial side, we're consistently focused on fully recovering the costs of providing the 365-day-a-year, 24/7 service for wastewater cleaning, production of drinking water, and then managing of the city's stormwater. And that is constantly in tension, but we've been doing a good job with your support of balancing what we need to recover and what our revenue requirements are with making sure that we have rates as well as rate structures that enhance ratepayer affordability. Our water, there are people out there who can afford some of the rate increases that we need, but there are a lot of people that as we need to generate the type of revenue in order to support our system, we want to make sure that there are ways in which we can reduce their overall burden. On the infrastructure side, there's a number of different things. We have to fundamentally take care of, operate, and maintain the stuff we already have. We have to, and we're in this a pretty big bubble right now of needing to either renew and or replace some of our older infrastructure when it reaches the end of its useful life. And then of course, there are new regulations, phosphorus requirements, continuing to deal with the combined sewer overflows, building new streetscapes. And so there's a whole new portion of infrastructure that we have to also be having enough money to build. And then the last leg of the three-legged stool is really making sure that we are supporting our staff. The financial piece and the infrastructure piece cannot happen unless we have sufficient staff. And not just sufficient staff for now, but also sufficient staff for where we're going. As well as one of our big shifts in emphasis is on improving our training. Making sure there's actual formal instruction, making sure our SOPs are up to date, and even starting to get into sort of more proficiency evaluations, not just performance evaluations, but can the people who are supposed to be doing certain jobs do all of the things in their job? And that if they can't, we need to make sure that they get proper instruction and training in order to do so. Next slide. A couple of highlights from FY22. We were able to provide the services that we do provide for the whole portion of the year in our wastewater plants since we did the disinfection and PLC upgrades have been performing exceedingly well, as has the water. We upgraded the Flynn and actually also the Fletcher pump station. So we did 2 pump station upgrades. These are the pumping systems that in the lower lying areas of the city, wastewater flows via gravity to these lower lying areas, and then these large pumps pump it back up to the major trunk lines that get it to the wastewater treatment plants. We installed 15 green stormwater infrastructure rain gardens up in the South Prospect area in order to reduce the flows going to the Pine Street CSO. I'm happy to report that even in these last 2 significant rain events, we have not had any combined sewers activate, which is always a happy day in my book. We have, and I think some of you have attended our presentations, we've submitted a draft integrated plan to the state, which is our approach really for how we're going to address those newer regulatory obligations. Particularly, it's very much emphasized on what Burlington is going to do in order to reduce the amount of phosphorus that we discharge to Lake Champlain. which is one of the drivers of cyanobacteria or blue-green algae blooms. And the current plan that we have and that we're crunching numbers on, gets us to that goal and beyond, which will allow us to address some of the seasonal variability that we see because of rainfall and how it influences our system. With your help and the adoption of the FY22 rates, we implemented Burlington Water's first Water Resources Assistance Program. That included the restructuring of the rates and most significantly included the waiver of the fixed fee, the sort of base charge that we added to the water bill. That is waived for people, low-income people, folks who are able to demonstrate that they benefit from some other state or federal program, seniors, as well as senior housing and low-income housing nonprofits. The other piece, which isn't necessarily as flashy, but there's been a ton of work, and I think in the coming months we're going to be talking to you all a lot more about this report and about what the findings and what it's going to mean as far as the work that we need to do. But we've done a pretty, very comprehensive assessment of our 3 wastewater treatment plants and of the amount of work that needs to be done to bring them fully up to speed and code and standard, and ensure that we are able to continue to produce very clean, safe water before discharging it to Lake Champlain. Next slide. This is a quick slide. I think we did a version of this slide in FY22 as we were looking at the impact of the COVID shutdown on our water usage. So the line in green is the 3-year average flows from 2017 to 2019. And then the blue line is what our actual flows were starting back in the 2020 period when COVID hit up until today. And you can see that our biggest hit was in fact the initial shutdown, the March 2020 shutdown, where that blue line dipped well below the green line. We were saved, if you will, by the hot summer of 2020, in which the flows exceeded what they had been traditionally. And then you can see as we've gotten into 2021 and certainly into 2022 that things are tracking much more similarly to the pre-COVID period. And you can also see additionally that we had a hot summer, hot drier summer in 2021. And anytime we have that, it certainly does help our bottom line because of the revenue that it generates. We have extended our disconnection moratorium long past when the state required us to do so. And like BED, who I believe maybe has already or will be lifting their disconnection moratorium for non-payment, we're going to be lifting ours in August 2022. That's only going to happen after we do significant outreach to customers, particularly directly to customers who may have past due balances, to make sure that they're aware of the state programs that exist, as well as to let them know that if they're able to enroll in payment plans with our division, and they're able to keep up with those payment plans, then we're not interested in shutting anybody off ever. We want to give lots of people lots of opportunity to come up with other ways to draw that balance down. Next slide. So on the expense side of the budget, I think as you've probably heard, there are some significant sort of base operational increases that are driven by salary, benefits, utilities. We use a lot of electricity to pump water and wastewater. And so when BED has a rate increase, that does affect us. Because of the age of our wastewater facilities, there is some increase in the repair and maintenance lines to make sure that we're able to deal with things when they break. A lot of the equipment is the inflationary costs as well as the lead times are significant. And so we want to make sure that we're well funded on that. We're also seeing significant increases in fuel and in our equipment maintenance charges from DPW General Fund. And on the water side, some of the chemical cost increases are eye-popping. Even just one particular chemical, a polymer that we use for wastewater, I believe increased 70%. So those are things that we're keeping an eye on, and certainly fingers crossed, hoping that things come down. There's a little bit of new debt service in wastewater to start paying for some of these projects that we've been completing and are funding through the State Revolving Fund loan program. There's also an increase in funding. If you remember one of those pieces about the infrastructure part of the the stool is operation and maintenance. And working with Chapin and with Lee Perry in the street maintenance division, we've identified that, you know, we need additional operation and maintenance staff. And so I believe street maintenance is adding 2 additional staff positions, and those are largely or wholly funded by Water Resources to work on things like fixing storm drains and manholes and doing more cleaning of our sewers, and so on and so forth. On the sort of technical administrative side, we are looking to add 3 new positions. One, which for right now I'm calling the risk and resiliency engineer. This is largely succession planning, and we don't always have the opportunity to do succession planning in the city, but we do know Steve Roy, who's been with the city for I think over 30 years. Very significant contributor, is the still my go-to when I've got questions. Transitioning him into a position that is wholly and completely focused on making sure, in particular, that our drinking water plant, but also wastewater plants, have good plans for addressing all of the new and future risks that are approaching. And really, this role would be largely focused on that training and proficiency piece and making sure that we have robust, almost like the fire department, right? We have many days where things go very, very well, and then we have emergencies that happen, and we need to be training on those emergencies very frequently to make sure that our staff are nimble and can react in the ways that they need to. The other piece is increasing our accounting or financial piece. I still largely do a large percentage of the accounting and financial management and dealing with these loans and whatnot. And I think we've been able to work with Catherine to sort of make a compelling case that it's going to be beneficial to the city as a whole, as well as to Water Resources, if we're able to add some actual accounting specific expertise in Water Resources. This is something that used to exist a long time ago. It's also going to be a shared cost with the Parking and Traffic Division, which also needs some additional assistance. Next slide. The good news is, you know, fiscally, I think we're pretty healthy. The water fund actually was upgraded from A1 to AA3 by Moody's in the last couple of months, based on how things are looking for us financially. The FY23 budget is including some contribution in all 3 funds to a capital reserve, which is something we hadn't been able to do previously, but is extremely important given the additional capital needs that we're going to have in the future. All 3 funds do have sufficient days of cash on hand. But as I said, all 3 funds really do have significant capital improvement needs in their immediate future. And so we have to be having well-funded balanced budgets and healthy cash reserves to support you know, loan underwriting and cash flow needs in the future as we move forward. Next slide. On the revenue side, you know, we constantly keep an eye on this, and should the city get into a period of growth, this will certainly help. But generally speaking, even with growth on the water side, which is how we do our bills, because any new, when people do redevelopment or renovate their buildings, they're often putting in lower flow fixtures, which is great for the environment, but it does mean less money for us to support the water system. And so generally in our models, we assume a conservative flat or even slight decrease in our overall water usage. And if we end up having more water usage, it certainly helps our bottom line. We're continuing to keep pretty conservative assumptions regarding the uptake of our affordability customers. Even though we've been doing extensive outreach, you know, at this point, we only have about 36 customers, 15 low-income customers and 21 senior customers who have signed up for our bill discount program. I suspect as time goes on and as we have additional rate increases, that number may go up. But certainly, you know, counselors, if you know of anybody who is struggling or concerned about their bill or concerned about the proposed rate increase, to please contact us and have us help them fill out that form. And then this year's budget, we are continuing to phase in the full cost of private fire protection fees. If you may recall from last year, you know, we had the option of sort of, for our commercial customers, immediately charging them the full cost of what it costs us to service their private fire lines and their private hydrants. But in order to mitigate their cost increases or their rate increases, we had decided to phase that in over 5 years. And so this is the second year of those 5 years. Next slide. This is the projected cash flow. Certainly you guys can take a more detailed look at it, kind of breaks it all down. But you can see that we essentially have balanced budgets with maybe slight surpluses. And then again, healthy pay-go capital, which is the annual capital, and then contributions to the capital reserve fund. Most significantly in wastewater, you do see a large contribution to the capital reserve fund, and that is because of some of the needs that we're seeing from that report that I mentioned and that we're going to be talking with you more about in very short order. Next slide. So overall, what does this mean? So last year, even though we were able to generate more revenue through our rate restructuring program, and if folks recall, there was effectively no rate increase, if not actually a decrease for your typical single family duplex and triplex customer, as well as some other customers. This year, we are proposing a 5.42 essentially bill increase for that typical customer, which is about $2.66 a month. For people who are eligible for that RAP affordability program and have the fixed fee, the base charge waived, they would be seeing about a 5.1% increase in that bill. Those customers in particular actually saw a large decrease last year. We sort of reset the clock for them. I believe the typical customer last year would have seen an actual 16% decrease in their bill from FY21 to FY22. So hopefully that action that we took last year is going to help them be able to swallow this needed increase. As far as getting into other customers, it's very hard to generalize because it's all based on how much impervious surface they have, which drives the amount of stormwater charge, if they have a fire protection line, and so on and so forth. If anybody has a particular customer, commercial customer that they're concerned about, can certainly contact them and we can generate a estimated bill for them based on their water usage. And next slide, which I think is just the questions. Nope, the looking ahead. I've alluded to it throughout the presentation, but continued and significant reinvestment is going to be needed across the wastewater, drinking water, as well as the stormwater funds. In particular, our wastewater treatment plants have systems that are older than 25 years old. And we are working to finalize a report that we'll be sharing with the City Council in the coming months. On the drinking water side, the reservoir pump house, which is up on Main Street, was built in 1867. And essentially the time has come for a new pump house to mothball the old and certainly keep it there as a backup, but to put in a new modern pump house to make sure that pump house is responsible for pumping water up to the elevated tanks, which is responsible for making sure that the hospital has sufficient water pressure up to the top floor. We still have water main replacement to do, and we still have old collection systems, storm sewers and wastewater sewer. So we got to tackle that. We're also going to be bringing forward a proposed plan for the tertiary filtration system that we would be installing at main plant, which would meet and exceed our phosphorus obligation for the lake. Burlington will be, perhaps before many other communities, doing its part to make sure that we have turned off the phosphorus faucet to our precious jewel of a lake. I've got relatively big hopes for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding, the EJA funding. We're still working with the state to really understand exactly what that means and how eligible we will be. But this next 5 years is, the single biggest bump of at least financing, because it's not necessarily all grant funding, but it's financing that is available to water systems to try to tackle the work that has sort of built up over the past few years. And I think that's it now. There we go.
Thank you, Megan. I hadn't quite caught that until now. That EJA funding, is that where we're going? We've gotten used to ARPA funding, and EJA funding is.
That's what I've heard it. So IIJA, yes, EJA funding.
Very good. All right. Thank you for the comprehensive review, and the floor is open now for council questions. Councilor Carpenter.
This is more of a comment, but Megan and I have discussed this, the need for continued education for the taxpayers around what causes the water to be corrupt. Real conflation around algae blooms and development. And they're, so I understand it, sort of two different, there's a lot of runoff, stuff runs downhill from other communities that we have algae blooms. The new building down the street is not causing the algae bloom. And so it continues.
In fact, it
and
usually helps with
it usually helps because you require them to put in stormwater runoff and all this good stuff. And so it just pops up a lot, living in a ward that is entirely bordered by the lake. And sort of a lot of finger pointing. So I just encourage us to do more education around that. And then the value of some of the things we can do, like the rain gardens and some of those, so some people seem useless. But
One thing I didn't specifically mention that is a great comment. And I believe it came to you all, I just can't remember when, is the launching for sort of formalization of the Blue BTV, the residential stormwater program, where we have a consultant who can do a sort of lake-friendly assessment on people's homes. And then the stormwater budget actually has 20 grand in it that will go specifically to if somebody goes to a property and says, hey, what you need is a rain garden, then we actually have money that can go to fund that rain garden on a private property, because indeed, every little bit helps. If every single person in the city just held on to a little bit more stormwater on their property, it would help reduce the flooding. It would help reduce what happens at the wastewater plants. It would help help the lake. And we do need to continue to drive home that message.
Mr. Barlow, go ahead.
Yes, I had a follow-on question on the on what we can do to decrease the amount of stormwater runoff. Is there? You said there's 20,000 available for to help private homeowners, I guess, address runoff concerns. But we have like a condo association in the North End that we think could benefit from rain gardens. Is there money available if we can find someone to partner with the city that's a private landowner to install rain gardens? We thought it would help the stormwater runoff problems.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with Jenna Olson, our policy and programs manager. I think our plan was certainly to start out with the sort of residential side and then ideally see how that goes. It gets a little harder sometimes with the volumes that you might see for some of the larger developments, right? It involves engineers. It's not just putting in a small garden. You actually need to design a practice. It's not to say that it isn't in our horizon. And we could talk offline to make sure, because some condo associations and some private properties are actually triggering some state regulations that are requiring them to do larger type things. For instance, and it hasn't come to Board of Finance and City Council, but we're actually going to be participating in a P3, a public-private partnership with Pomerleau and I can't remember if it's CHT to CHT to be a pass-through agent for some state funding, and only the municipality can receive, but then we can be a pass-through agent so that they can.
Muted, Megan.
I am. I'm not
Might
muted
want
on.
to turn off your video to see if that helps.
Okay. Hello?
The answer to that, which is the P3 that's coming to the council, is that kind of public-private partnership for improving stormwater. So we'll have Jenna get in touch with you about the condo proposal in particular and the opportunities there. But yes, we know we need not just the individual property owner, but larger properties as well.
And I did have one other question around all the infrastructure needs. I appreciated the presentation that you and Megan brought to the TUC in March.
Yeah.
And I remember the price tag, and I just rechecked it, being like projected cost of $175 million to address all these concerns. especially around wastewater and stormwater. And I guess I'm wondering, the part that we can't get through federal infrastructure funding or other non-taxpayer means, would they be funded through revenue bonding, general obligation bonding, or some combination of both?
Yes, we'd be using the state revolving fund for most of the reinvestment that's needed. There are a number of benefits of using it. While it's administratively complex, it makes Megan pull her hair out. The administrative fee is much less. We don't start paying until the year after we've finished construction. There are many benefits to this. Long-term bonding.
All of the EGF funding will be flowing through those state SRF programs. So unfortunately, there's not like a separate pathway. So basically we would put everything through the state revolving fund program. Likely if they have enough money, that's one of the things we need to figure out, is make sure that they actually have enough financing funds available. And if not, there could be other resources, such as there's a state a federal loan program called WIFIA.
Would you anticipate
They
a
would
bond?
be, yeah, they wouldn't be general obligation bonds, they'd be revenue bonds.
Which makes a significant difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
It changes the base of who's responsible for it by quite a bit.
Would it be on our balance sheet or it run through the state?
It would be on the city debt.
But it'd be
It
right.
would be debt to this, entity of the cities that has its own independent credit rating.
Okay.
I think, right, or is that just the water?
Water has its own independent credit rating, but the way we have our own resolution bond resolution, so it is typically funded fully by the wastewater fund, the water fund, or the stormwater fund.
This is a significant issue, Councilor Barlow, as you're noting, and we're working hard to develop as much detail as we can about where this is headed, what the federal opportunities mean for local ratepayers, what the timeline is for the investment. We are working to have those answers as quickly as we can. As was mentioned in the presentation, there's this major engineering report that commission that is being finalized, and so we will be back to talk about this again in the next couple of months. And frankly, it's our goal to have further discussion about it before some of the big decisions that are coming, other financial decisions that are coming, really to school. We want to have all this out there for there's no surprise later.
Thanks.
So to be continued. Any other councilors? I'm not seeing any other hands on the Zoom or in the room, so we will move to close the water resources section of the discussion. Thank you, Megan. And we will welcome Jeff Paget to the table and move to traffic.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Paget, I'm the Division Director for Parking and Traffic. We got 8 slides behind this with lots of detail. I'll try to get the way it talks and get too deep. But I do want to spend a moment on this slide because this slide actually contains a lot of philosophy around what we're doing in the division right now. We have a lot going on. We have 3 different funds, 264, 265, and 53, that are all different. They have different rules. 264 and 265 are special revenues funds, but they have different rules between them. And 53 is a general fund. And it's actually contributing to the general fund. So in managing all of these, we actually have 3 new managers running these groups. Worked hard on management sort of structure around systems, financial controls, real focus on public safety, customer-centric approach. Parking, stop signs, services to it. that's the complexity of it.
I have an unstable internet connection. I know, I'm setting it when it's stable over here.
So anyway, so then the other person is Matt Patrick, who we just brought on last summer as a facilities manager for the garages and lots. He's doing a great job in turning around repair and maintenance, and I think you start to attack how people feel difference in the garage. Got some major improvements going on there. Just we're going out to bid this week on a major improvement to the marketplace garage. And we're doing major improvements. So anyway, so we got new people, we got new attitudes. So we're improving performance relative to customer service, focusing on customers. We're actually empowering employees in a way that it's actually getting results. We have happy, I mean, I had someone walk in my office just today saying, I'm so happy to have your support in this project. So, but we do have ongoing economic challenges. We are heavily dependent on the economy. We are directly tied to it. We're retail. So we'll talk about that in the next few slides. So we're recovering, but it's slow and it's still a little painful. We're getting a lot of help from the CT office to help manage that. But one of the things that we really try to do is really focus on safety now in all parts, whether it's parking enforcement, parking, you know, we did the food, fines for food, which I think you guys were all aware of. We reformed the SCOF to minimize risks to vulnerable communities. We've got a WOOPS program going now where you can actually get anybody in the city, anybody who parks anywhere in the city, wherever you're from, you can get out of one parking ticket a year as long as not a safety issue. Resident parking overstaying. We have a contractor parking program now, so contractors working in resident only area, part of town, they can actually buy an annual permit. They can just go there and work in a neighborhood all summer long for like $100. And we're working closely with PSD to work on some things. So anyway, so that's why I just want to spend a minute on this, because this really what we're trying to do on the next 8 slides, which I'm going to last 3 slides. All right, so let's go on to the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We had some technical issues here.
Oh, so anyway, so we've set revenues for next year at pre-pandemic levels. At the same time, we have reallocated costs from the 53 budget for personnel, because the reality is the parking enforcement, parking service agents actually support the traffic group by enforcing the meters. So they're servicing this special revenue fund. So the special revenue fund should be paying for that service. So we've done a cost shift and shifted money out of parking services and into traffic. And Megan already alluded to the new financial person that we'll be sharing to help us to navigate all these matters. One important thing is school crossing guards. We're having a very hard time budgeting or hiring for it. The budget's usually to hire everybody be like $230,000, but we're not hiring even 50%. So I can't carry that kind of a ghost number, $7,000, $8,000. So we've budgeted down to 7%, but we're still hiring. If we get up to hiring everybody, we'll be right back looking for a budget that fix that. But we just couldn't carry that. So, all right. So and then on to 265 parking facilities. That's a $3.4 million budget. Again, this is completely non-tax revenue. We run the marketplace garage, and the College Street, Lakeview, and Westlake complex are in the process of being rebranded this summer as the downtown garage. So you're one of the first to hear this concept, because the College Street, Lakeview, Westlake complex is just a lot to say. And we run the metered lots, the monthly lots, and the metered lots. Highlights: there's no gates in any of our garages anymore. This is transformational to how we operate our operations.
It's all park mobile?
It's all park mobile and kiosk. So to allay any fears, we still take coin in the garage. You can't pay without a credit card. You can't pay without a cell phone. You have coin. You don't have billing systems.
To comment on that, because I work a lot all over that, a little more public education of how, because it's so easy once you figure it out.
Yeah.
And these days, most of the people do actually have cell phones. So I don't know how we do this, but.
But we have folks, we have staff in the garages
Yeah.
around 7 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock at night, and there's a big.
Very helpful.
Yeah, they know how to do it. There's a big sign law says, if you need help,
Yeah.
call this number and that phone will ring. They don't pick it up, don't.
Because I'm not older, but honestly, I needed help the first time. And they were really like, yeah, great, you just do this. And I think letting people know that they're.
So the other big thing is Elmwood has been decommissioned to make way for the pods. All those parkers in the process being shifted to Lakeview. Our revenues, even a lot went away, we're retaining the parkers. And we've actually opened up Pearl Street lot for 15 parkers. This is a very underutilized lot, and there's activity in there, and also it's an alternative for people at Elmwood that may want closer space. We're going to dole that out on a basis. And again, focusing on safety at the garages, we've got a lot of structural work going on. We've got new lights going in, new bulbs going in. We're doing a lot more patrols. We actually have almost to come in about 80% of budget this year in the garages. Fund balance was completely consumed. We're working closely with CT office. These things are coming forward soon. We're going to be backstopped by ARPA and anticipation of. So like I said, we are tied directly to the economy. So when the economy went down, cash stopped flowing. It stopped flowing to us too. But revenues are recovering. Again, see this chart is very similar to the previous chart. Our peak season, we were up, and in our off season, we were up. So we're excited about where we're heading into this summer. So these are the projections. Again, this fantasy chart on the left looks very fantasy-like, but I don't think that it's unrealistic. And we were hitting monthly budget last fall. And really in the fall's our peak, we really need to be exceeding our, annual budget divided by 12. So I just projected out through the end of the year. I think we can do that. If we grow at the same rate we grew last year and get back to normal, I think we're fine. Again, major structural repairs are coming. Again, we shifted money over to the parking services group. And we've increased our security budget by 33%. We've increasing it from $120,000 to $160,000. We have ongoing bad behavior during the day. We have 2 guards on from 11 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning, and then 1 from 3 to 7. That's not when bad stuff seems to happen. Bad stuff seems to happen at 4 o'clock. It's really amazing. So we're looking to increase daytime patrols. And we're working closely with the hotels. Okay. So parking services. All right, so parking services, their revenues all from tickets. They enforce safety regulations. They control retail parking on and off street, so meters and the garages, that's where we do the cross shift. And they enforce resident parking. Big news is they are physically moved into DPW now. They are in the house, and we are on a constant drumbeat focus on customer service and community service. I actually have sort of soft motto of the program for the past couple of weeks called safety and equity. That's what parking service should be. It's either a car is parked in front of a hydrant, that's a safety issue, or they parked in a handicap spot, that's an issue. And almost every violation of ordinance, we've started to categorize it into those 2 spaces. So try to put a human face on it. It's not just giving out tickets. It's just not just raking in money. That's not what we're about. We've created digital permits for the resident only. Whoops program I talked about, contractor permits. We think the revenues are going to return, and food for fines again. We made a $40,000 donation going back on our revenues. So. All right, going forward, this is the last slide. So going forward, we're expecting to get back on budget. We think we're gonna hit budget this year at 25% of normal. We're gonna get back to normal levels. COVID-19 really had a major impact on our facilities. So we had during the clean sweep this year, we had 2 parking service agents for 2 or 3 minutes. It was mayhem. They were out scrambling. I mean, people don't understand in the middle of it. So many people working in the middle of the night and supporting the school operation. But they got it done. So with this cost shift, we have reduced, we think a sustainable way, reduced the costs to 53, which is general fund. So we reduce the costs of that ostensibly raises our contribution to the general fund. But we would kind of like to keep the general fund contribution the same by reducing tickets. So we don't want to hurt the general fund, but we want to reduce tickets at the same time. So this is a strategy we're working with. We're coming with a reorg fairly soon that should help with our staffing issues. There's more to come on that, but we recognize that having 5 parking service agents isn't enough to make those on vacation. Somebody gets sick, somebody quits. We get a 20-30% reduction in workforce instantly, which is not terrible. But you'll hear more about that in July. That's it.
Piece that would just add to that is it's actually a proposal to reduce total number of FTEs by combining 2 work groups and making more efficiencies. So we're excited to bring that forward. Questions?
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Floor is open for council questions. Council Carpenter.
These are more comments, and maybe you can't answer this. I'm just curious how the lack of city place may have happened to be simultaneously with COVID, but that must have been a big dent in the revenue, and then this is sort of a going forward observation that with a different set of retail stores, might have different traffic patterns to it. I mean, I just see people coming downtown for different things than they used to come downtown for.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges we're facing post-COVID is the office workers are not downtown to the same level Monday through Friday. So a lot of what used to, weekends have always been popular marketplace in downtown, but really it's that middle of the week traffic.
And that's probably gonna stay. I mean, even like my former employer, that had 40 people, the building's only gonna be full with half of them. I mean, they're gonna be hybrid forever.
And we do have customers, we have customers who have a monthly partners. You know, they have a monthly permit. People are coming in now, so they're actually coming off of the monthly Parker program, but going on to a validation program. So we're not losing them as customers, we just have to change our product. So it's a different game, and that's why I didn't project too far out in 265 stuff, because it's changing almost, monthly. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Well, and just, and Chip and I have discussed this, the other, I think, significant issue is at least the perception that it's very hard to park downtown. So I hear that very loud. Whether how true or not that is a question of the day, but I'd rather go University Mall, it's quicker, easier to get. That's alive and well.
Our revenues are still down in the streets.
The revenues just suggest it's easier to park in downtown.
It's misinformation if it's way.
Which, as we've always said, not a good problem. You want to, if you're driving downtown, you want to have a parking problem.
I mean, there's a parallel. I mean, there's no Macy's anymore either, so that's driving some of it, but.
So just a couple of quick things. We do have on the shelf a complete wayfinding, interior wayfinding.
Before we go there, I just want to address, Councilor Carver has raised a couple times something that I think is important. I think it's not consistent with my understanding of how the last 4 years, let's say, has unfolded. The City Place garage, mall garage, went away well before COVID. It was taken down at the end of 2017.
Okay.
So almost more than 2 years before COVID began, and we did not experience substantial fiscal problems in our garages or on the streets as a result of that, or frankly, in any of the city revenues. Somewhat to the surprise of many, even our sales tax revenues really were not impacted to the degree you might have thought from using all of those retailers. Our gross receipts continue to go up, and so I just want to say that because I do think there's this sense out there that the city lost a ton of revenues when the mall went under, and because the mall had been dying for some time, because the vacancies had been building up, because it was becoming a smaller part of what the downtown economy was about, which is what led us to take the action we did. It's really been quite modest, the economic impacts. Very different story when we get to COVID. The current budget concerns we have in parking really start with just the shutdown of the economy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we had going into COVID, we had a fund balance of $2 million. And we burned through all of it because we went from 0 revenue for 3 months to 30% revenue for 8 months to, can't. Fun fact, Matt Fitzpatrick, our facilities manager, used to run that project.
Scott and I were talking to the growth in online sales is changing the complexion, but it actually doesn't penalize the city because we get don't we get that?
That's right, and that's been part of the reason why I think we've seen the sales tax remain healthy, even with the loss of some retailers. It's hard to tease it out, but we do get the online revenues have been growing obviously since the federal law changed. And more than federal law change, we had to work. The city attorney's office was quite active in getting to where we are today, where automatically numerous online retailers collect and send us the sales there. So that's definitely. Any other questions, Councilor Barlow?
Yes, I have two questions. One is about the graffiti problem you mentioned earlier in the presentation. Is it on signs, in garages, on meters, or all of the above?
Yeah, we had entire meters being made out of, we got to just to extend the just general vandalism. Yeah, and our budget, I think, last year, I think I did a budget and raising the budget from 20,000 to 50,000, just because we had to buy so many signs. There's only so many times you can wipe graffiti off of a reflective sign before it's not reflective. You gotta get a sign.
You try to identify the perpetrators and refer that to BPD or cameras?
We do now have ViewWorks, which is our asset management program, which will allow us over time to start mapping where the hotspots are. So there's lots of hotspots for this thing, but it's pervasive. I think where the garages sitting there painting graffiti, covering graffiti almost every day. It's busy.
My other question was around crossing guards. And I guess first off, if they're there for the safety of school children, and if you're operating at less than 50% of the optimal staffing level, how does that work? How do you prioritize where the guards are? So that's part one of my question. And then part two is, could we use temporary services or something to fill that void where we had?
It's really challenging. So Dan Hill manages that group, and he strategically places them in the schools at the critical intersections in the schools. And we've tried a number of ways of reaching out to different groups to try to get more crossing guards in. Done all the typical advertising, use all that. But it's been a real challenge, and the part of the limitation is in order to do it, you have to go through the background check. So you can't, and you have to advertise. So it's not, you have to have a year check. So it's not like we can just get a bunch of volunteers to say you want to be crossing guards next week. It actually, you have to sign up. It takes 3 or 4 weeks to get through that process, and then you get deployed. So we have a lot of people that will come sign up and say they want to do it in the interim between when they sign up and when they get their check. They decide to do that. So it's really challenging. But we have a number of strategies we're working through to try to get that back.
We split those shifts? We split the shifts?
The shift yeah, so right now, so this is sort of one of the things we did was typically they always said if you do it, you have to do it in the morning and the afternoon, which is really awkward. It's like a 15-minute, right? So we said, well, we'll take you anytime. You want to work the morning, you can work the morning. If you want the afternoon, work the afternoon. If you want Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if you want, we'll take any time you will give. I have some of my neighbors have signed up and they're doing it. So yeah, anybody pass the word. We are very flexible. This is it's a public service job. And there's a lot of people that join.
No, but maybe a bigger push on almost not having them be volunteers, but we really need you. Like if you just come 3 mornings a week as a
like a service.
Like a service.
Yeah.
What does they get paid? We've increased their pay twice by 10% each time. So
It's a crossing guard.
So, yeah, I forget, it's 170 a week or something.
on an hourly basis, I want to say.
Yeah, right.
But you only
But
work
it's-
50 minutes twice a day,
Right.
and you don't work
Yeah.
school
It's-
vacations, you know, so it's
It's
not.
far above livable wage. The problem is it's 250 as well. We've worked with the schools, and the schools have actually helped because their folks are had background checks as well. So school my daughter goes to, many days, the school administration is helping at the crossing. So we're struggling with it. We've been struggling for 4 or 5 years. We're going to continue to work our best. Any suggestions you ever want?
Hey, when I went to school, the 6th graders did. You got a white belt and a badge.
Yeah. Yep.
That was a million years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to sit 6th grader on the middle of North Avenue.
Seriously.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's cool.
Maybe high school.
Okay, I'm not seeing any Any hands online? And I do not see any more questions in the room, so we will close the traffic section. Thank you both. Thanks. And now we have a series of citywide non-departmental important items to review. This could be some of the more interesting discussions in this budget review process. And Jordan will kick it off, focus on regional programs. Just call it regional programs. Long history of calling it regional programs. I'm not sure anyone remembers exactly why we call it regional programs. Some of them clearly are regional initiatives, other aren't really that, but they all fall into this.
So I don't have a PowerPoint. Well, you're welcome to pull it up. Yeah, so the regional programs budget, for counselors not familiar with it, is an annual budgeted allocation to fund various nonprofits and organizations that make Burlington great. It also is where we fund our sister cities. Maybe what I will do is, so in this year, the budget for the regional programs is consistent with past years with some slight modifications. And the reason that I am sitting here is because the regional programs budget is administered through the mayor's office. The organization reach out to us with their invoices annually to request their allocated amount, and we send them a check. So I am glad to answer questions. Maybe the most
I would add just two things from a budgeting perspective. We added the accessibility committee $15,000 here. Last year, we had the same amount of money, but it was housed in the HR budget. That was confusing because it was not an HR-led initiative. So we decided to move it into regional programs. Because it wasn't there before, it looks like it's new, but it's not. And the community bystander and indigenous people study money was one-time money. You'll see it's not funded again in 2023. But after discussions with President Paul, that money, I know for community bystander, it's all of it. I'm not sure if it's all of it or just most of it for the indigenous people study. Whatever hasn't been spent will be rolled over so it can be spent in 2023.
Okay. Anything you say? So
maybe we're increasing our allocations behind our senior center.
And also by $5,000 to Champlain. Oh, yes, and thank you. You will notice we also moved the $400,000 for the crisis management, crisis response RFP that was in regional programs last year. That is also continuing, but you will see it on Monday in the BPD budget. So there really aren't a lot of changes here, just some of them have moved it either into this budget or out of this budget, and they're in another place.
okay. Any questions? Not seeing any in the room at this point or online. Good. We will move to the discussion of the unassigned fund balance. We've had a short presentation here. Let's point up and share this discussion. This is for many years, the conversation about unassigned fund balance was pretty straightforward. The goal was to increase it. In 2012, the unassigned fund balance was at one point negative $16 million, and it was a multi-year project to get out of the red essentially and build that all the way back, set a policy on where we wanted to get to, and we have a little bit of history, and we have a slide that sort of shows some of them.
You let me go through the slide.
Sorry, all right. I didn't know. I'm turning over to Catherine.
It's okay.
I love the unassigned fund balance. Part of the budget, I feel personal responsibility for it, but I'll let Catherine
And I feel
take it from here.
And I feel super grateful that of all the people have said, wow, you came into this job at a bad time, but I came in at a great time because I did not have a negative $16 million rainy day fund. As you will see, there is a rainy day fund and we still have it in the midst of COVID. So this just is a definition and says, yes, we call it the rainy day fund. Here is a link to our fund balance policy, and there's lots of details in here. The most important things are it establishes a minimum that we need to keep 5% of the previous year's general fund operating expenditures in that rainy day fund. Our target is 10%, and we don't want to keep more than 15%. Any amount in excess of 15 needs to be assigned to something or used to reduce taxes. The excess should not be used to fund recurring or routine operating expenses and should be used either for emergencies or for planned projects. Here is the slide you wanted. This is the slide that the auditors put together for us last year, and this is the 5-year look back in terms of dollar amounts, and you can see we've been pretty stable between about $8.5 and $9.5 million. And then on this next slide, it shows where we are in that percentage. And remember, 10% is our target. We don't want to go over 15%. We don't want to go below 5%. So you'll see after our most recent audit, which was FY21, which is, we just approved a couple of months ago, we're sitting at 13.8%. So we are above 10%. So it looks like we could spend some money. We could spend 2.5 and that would leave us at 10%. But that's not all. Because we also have, confusingly, the assigned fund balance. And that is money that previous city councilors obligated or assigned that we have that is not showing up in that $9 million. And it's planned to be used for a specific project. There are many examples, but some of them that I listed here, every year we put the money we get from the state into the reappraisal fund. We have a snow removal reserve in case we spend all of the money in DPW and more snow comes, or the warming shelter pilot from last year. We can unassign money from that if we think we are not going to complete a project or it's already done and it didn't cost as much money as we thought. And then we return that money to the unassigned fund balance. What I left out of here was the slide about what we wanted to take out of the assigned fund balance. But what we would like to do is there are 2 items in the assigned fund balance that could be freed up. And those items are in other notes that I have here. And it is, we currently have $1 million in health insurance reserves, and we are proposing that we de-obligate $250,000 of that, leaving $750,000 in that reserve, which we have not had to use. And we currently have $1.75 million in our workers' comp and liability insurance reserve. And after discussing that with our insurance agent, they feel we would be okay with the $1 to $1.5 million reserve. So if we de-obligated $750,000 from that, that would free up another $1 million and still leave us with healthy reserves for both health insurance as well as workers' comp. And let's remember, those are additional reserves. We have the rainy day fund, which, you know, God forbid we needed. We had a problem with health insurance. We couldn't go to the rainy day fund. But what we've done is say we have this other special reserve and we would use that first. All of that being said, if we did all of that, we would have about $3.5 million that we could spend in one-time money. And here are ideas for how to spend it. $800,000 for a bike path reimbursement. That's going to sound new and unfamiliar to you, and is something that we can discuss further in an executive session. $500,000 for recycling toters, which we've talked about in Chapin's presentation. $500,000, I am not sure if you or Doreen have talked about the investment at 405 Pine, or if you'd like to do that now.
I think this would be a good opportunity to talk about it. Again, many counselors have heard about this and had direct discussions and tours with Doreen Kraft over recent months or even years. The Arts Foundation purchased 405 Pine Street a couple of years ago with really no city money, no city other than the city commitment to help lease the space there. They have continued to make progress with the capital campaign since then, and are close to being able to move forward. So a variety of improvements of that project, again, of that building, again, largely funded by private through fundraising and other earned revenue. We are, it's been anticipated for some time, approaching the point that I think if that broader project is going to succeed, if we're going to get ensure the long-term success of that that building and the programs in it, and if we're going to be able to expand those, cities can make some financial commitment. I think they have an opportunity to do so with some $7,000.
Right.
And that is essentially a match to a recent state grant that UC has been successful in securing.
Thank you. The next 500,000 is this issue we talked about yesterday with Scott, and that is moving the city IT equipment out of Memorial. Next up is 500,000, and that is BPRW investment in a variety of areas, and we didn't go into all the details here. We have Cindy, and we have them planned out. That is everything from seeding and fertilizing athletic fields, new gates at Oak Ledge and North Beach, some cemetery work, stormwater improvements, rebuilding tennis courts, a lot of important work there. $250,000, which would be to hire some consultants to work with the CT office to help identify ongoing new revenue opportunities. Something you pointed out, Councilor Carpenter, so a lot of these one-time monies, there's grant money that will be going after, but it is also a good opportunity post-COVID, after the reappraisal, to look at where are we getting our revenues, where are new opportunities to get revenues, how are those affecting the various members of our community. So putting some money aside to do that. And then yesterday, we also, Brian Pine spoke about the jobs and people study. We have $25,000 already reserved for that, and he had asked for 100, so 75,000 to top that up. And questions and discussion?
Can we go back to the other side?
Yes.
And on the memorial piece, I guess, because obviously there's a lot of different things that could be done with the memorial, but I don't know what your current plan is and like how much we have to invest in it to stabilize the building versus.
Yes, there's a work session on Monday that is going to be a significant update on that. There was discussion at PAC last meeting, and so you're gonna learn a lot more about that before you're asked to weigh in on this expenditure. So that's part of the urgency of having that work session on Monday. So to be taken. Councilor Carpenter.
Since board director White is here, and I saw her working hard as I drove into the meeting, will some of this money go to fix some of the cemetery issues that we?
Yes, we're putting, it's an estimate, we put in there about $75,000 to look at, but we're gonna look at stormwater across the whole cemetery. Because as, you know, I asked our planning team for, you know, an idea for numbers for this, and John Adams called and says like, well, let's not just look at there, let's look at stormwater across that whole cemetery, because it all flows downhill to the lake. So we use that opportunity to get a broader look at that, but then also very specifically looking at that one section.
Cindy was standing out in the rain with the entire cemetery commission.
Oh, yeah, you're me. I think we actually got a huge win off of a Cambrian Rise work and some work that we need to get there. It's kind of exciting. So anyway, yeah, it was getting a little damp though.
We got Councilor Barlow, go ahead.
I had a question, just so I understand, the assigned fund balance that is available, that's just over accruals for in certain funds that you're gonna now use for, you're gonna say we're not gonna spend them so that we can use them on other projects?
Yes, so there are several different things in assigned fund balance, and what might be helpful is to send around this list of everything that's in here, because a lot of things will stay. Like there's an ongoing balance for ELI, and Cara pulls that down as she needs it in addition to ongoing money that she gets. We thankfully have not needed the snow removal reserve, so that just stays year to year. It's only when we see something in the current balance and we say, hey, we're never gonna do that project, or that balance looks too high and we should free that money up for something. And so that's what we're suggesting in these two cases, is that looking at the health insurance and the workers' comp reserves, they seem to be a bit high. And so an option is for us to unassign that money to use for other purposes.
And then in terms of the proposals for spending the unassigned fund balances, we've heard about some of these items in the departmental presentations. Are those items already built into the departmental budgets, or are they dependent upon the use of unassigned fund balance? Like in the case of the toters that we heard about from DPW?
So this is a great question. It is currently built into DPW's budget, but if we get direct, part of this process is to get direction and feedback. And for example, if we hear absolutely go on the toters, the next version of the budget would back out that money from the toters and we would do something else. For each one of these items, we wouldn't have to do it. There is another way.
I guess the point of my question is we know we had a shortfall this year that's not going to be quite as short as we thought it might be because revenues have been stronger. And I'm thinking next year we could have structural budget issues because we may not have one-time ARPA monies or whatever to put toward it. So it wouldn't be prudent, to keep the unassigned fund balance higher so that we could use it for another rainy day should we have one next year if we didn't have a tax increase. It's more of a rhetorical
Yes,
question.
right. And I think these are the conversations we'll want to have.
So this is the decision, and if you think we're being not conservative enough, some of it we have to get to mutually. Our preliminary sense, pending these conversations and feedback leading up to the vote a month from now is, and just to make sure we're remembering, we're proposing staying at more than the 10% target and having this additional $2 million reserve, revenue replacement reserve in case some of the ARPA, in case some of the revenue assumptions for the year are not met, since we are essentially projecting a return to normal. So you've got the 10% plus that 2 million. In addition, we have these specific reserves for these areas of significant budget volatility that are funded and continue to be funded in that assigned fund balance reserve. So when you add all of these things up, it is considerably, it's 10% plus, that's why we're comfortable having this discussion. But it's certainly, it's why we didn't a year ago have this conversation proposed coming down. Felt more uncertainty a year ago. Now we're feeling some confidence about moving back towards that target.
And I appreciate that. And I guess I would, with this year's, the uncertainties around inflation, around COLAs for next year, around, other unanticipated needs, I would just, if we could hold on to as much of it as possible to prevent the need for a tax increase on the municipal rate, that would be ideal. And if we think we can do that and meet and use part of the unassigned fund balance for these items, then I could be supportive of that.
Okay, we'll process that and come back to you with further response.
I have a question.
Councilor Jay, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I definitely do feel like we need to also think about the taxpayers and knowing that the tax increase did not pass, and knowing also that we have conditions of some of the sidewalks in the city that are in a very deplorable condition. I would rather make sure that we invest in those instead of $500,000 for a private business owner or other items. And from my perspective, that's something that we need to prioritize, because now it's all this DPW is telling us they have to prioritize even some works that were submitted a couple of years ago. I feel like, it will benefit everyone, and also it will minimize the liabilities. Some of them are liabilities to the city. I would rather have at least, a couple of miles of sidewalk being fixed with an unassigned fund balance.
So thank you, Councilor Jang. And I would, we'll have follow-up conversations, and if there are specific, I think I understand. I'll follow up to clarify if there are specific items that are being suggested that we wait on that kind of feedback. I mean, if your message is don't do any of this, that's one thing. If you have specific things that you think should come off the list, we'll welcome that feedback. Councilor Berger.
Thank you. I want to sort of echo some of what Councillor Barlow said regarding its relationship to the presented budgets. And now I'm talking about the proposed spending. And let me just say, I am not inclined to be more austere. I really believe austerity is killing far too many people. So that is not my inclination. On the other hand, I want to be prudent. And that means, one, if DPW's budget that was presented included a proposal that we're now seeing here, but other budgets didn't, and we're not getting full information. So I would, Catherine mentioned about the full list of the assigned fund balance. I would like to see that. It would be great to have. And where these fit within all of the departments' challenges and their priorities is something like what Councillor Jang said. That would be helpful, because otherwise we are not operating with a full picture. And let me just sort of end by, I do think that the questions related to the contract negotiations are something that while we probably will want to have that in executive session, that is a consideration for us and the allocation of X amount of dollars. So I cannot, without more context, tell you that I like this project more than I like that project. So I need more time to do that. I would, sort of say, we want to make transformation on North Winooski Avenue and that corridor. And I can tell you that the sidewalk between Pho Hung and Archibald Street on the west side of the street is terrible. Should that be part of this? Because the people of the old North End had as their highest transportation priority improve sidewalks? Perhaps. So I would love to have more context to be able to make those decisions. There's nothing on the list strikes me as outrageously wrong, but the information is insufficient at this point.
All right. Well, we'll take it as a minor victory of the evening that nothing appears outrageously wrong. And
you should do that.
And work to get you some. I think I understand the request for more context. We certainly do have. We have a document that is an update of a document shared just a couple months ago about the assigned fund balance. So there should be, I think, even with the new council, right, we had some discussion that there are some changes to that we should get you in full, and will be part of the materials, and I think we're ready to send that out immediately, so you can see that piece of it. Sidewalk, we worked hard to make sure we were continuing our historic level, historic in a much higher level than our historic level of investment in sidewalks. Again, this year, 3 miles of sidewalks are in the budget that we presented to you. If certainly it's a discussion that could be had about putting even more capital dollars into there. Certainly, I hope it's clear that we're trying to make good on the policy of any unassigned fund balance spending is going into essentially one-time costs, is not going on into ongoing funding. So there will be a limited relationship by kind of design between unassigned fund balance spending and future tax rates, with the exception of efforts that we're trying to make investments to create more non-property tax revenue or savings. So that's part of the thinking here. It isn't, I don't see a good way to translate, this one-time savings that has been built up into sort of durable tax relief for folks. You can give people some momentary relief, but that then results in some cliff at some ensuing point. So that's why we haven't, we aren't proposed, that's why we're proposing the way we did. We think the way to get to some long-term tax relief and benefit is through revenue generating or efficiency creating investments. Okay, one benefit of the budget schedule, the way it is to sort of get all this out there on the table about a month before a vote is needed. And I will be meeting with the caucuses in the weeks ahead, and certainly for councilors who aren't members of caucuses who want a further discussion about this as we move towards a final recommended budget. There's time to do that and make alterations to this. Any further, do you have any questions, Catherine, or anything further clarification you wanted based on those comments? No. Okay, well, we will not seeing any further hands, so I'm gonna close the ARPA section of the budget. We have two more.
We're gonna go to the ARPA section.
I'm sorry, we're gonna close the unassigned fund balance section. We have ARPA, tax rate, and health retirement still left. We also have warned an executive session to start shortly. So I believe, do we have President Paul on there? We do have President Paul there. President Paul, thank you for, if people don't know, President Paul has a very happy family milestone that is happening right now. The graduation of her youngest child, and she has generously interrupted those festivities to be with us for the executive session. President Paul, how would you like to proceed? Would you like to go at this point to the executive session and come back to the remaining budget items after the executive session, or should we proceed with the budget at this point?
Well, thanks, Mayor, and thanks very much. I mean, we all have many things going on in our lives and many celebrations, and I appreciate your mentioning mine, but just want to acknowledge that this is special meetings are always difficult for everyone, and so appreciate everybody making the time for this. I don't know how much I just got on, so I'm not really sure where exactly you are on the agenda.
We have 3 items left. They hopefully, I think we can have a preliminary discussion about them fairly quickly. Some of it is repetition, largely repetition of stuff we have talked about before. The ARPA budget certainly is, and there are people here specifically for the ARPA budget, and it might be helpful if we could at least get through that. And frankly, maybe we should just do that, get through the ARPA budget, and then we could, at the Board of Finance meeting on Monday, we could add to the agenda, we could, the tax rate and the health retirement, which is sort of not this, which I think are things the Board of Finance will have particular interest in. We could, how about we do that? We have a quick presentation on the ARPA budget, and then we will move the tax rate and the health retirement workers' comp sections to Monday.
Sure.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
So great, Kara, come on up. As everyone remembers, I'm sure Kara Al-Azraoui has multiple hats leading our recovery effort, and has been put in charge of the city's efforts to invest the American Recovery Act funds well. And we have talked about this previously, and I'll turn it over to Kara. There is an intersection between our previous discussions and the budget that you're going to be asked to approve in a month, and hopefully this presentation will kind of make that clear. We also will be asking for some new approvals in the upcoming budget approval. So go ahead, Kara. Thank you.
Kevin, I can let you start if you want.
Great, I will just very quickly get us to new funding and then turn it over to you, Kara. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I just want to set the stage. We all know we're fortunate enough to get a $27 million allocation of ARPA funds. This time last year, City Council obligated $7.3 million of that for lost revenue. You can see that here. Then during FY22, these are the obligations that were made. That was another $7.5 million. So that brings us to 14.8. And I think we all know all the various things that covered, so I won't go into them. They're here. If you have questions, Cara and I could answer them. Once we get through all of that, that brings us to today, where we have about $12.2 million left to obligate. Take it away, Cara.
Actually, you can do the first one.
Okay, great. Also, you know, the things that we have already talked about through these other presentations, the $2 million revenue replacement reserve that would only be used if needed. And that is because we brought revenues back up to their normal level, the FY19 level. Also, the equity investments at the $1.2 million level. You'll see on the next slide, it's FY24, and we're phasing those out. And it's $800,000 in FY24. Then also the $350,000 we spoke about last night in CEDO's budget for constituent services, and the $250,000 that we spoke of last night when Cara was wearing her other hat with her new budget for her new department, sorry. And then that brings us to some of the newer items.
Yep, so some of the newer items, community infrastructure was very highly rated in the survey that we put out from ARPA. We have sort of held off on that until we could see what the revenue replacement piece was needed. We would like to move forward with it in this fiscal year, setting aside $2 million, and have a robust RFP process where we are encouraging community partners, but also departments of the city to apply to either upgrade or create community infrastructure, which would be space for food, music, gathering, things of that sort. And so that process would be very transparent, and we would move forward with that. The other one you see here is the targeted high impact grants. So many of our community partners have reached out to us needing amounts ranging from $5,000 to $150,000. Some of these that I can think of right now are, there's a community partner who would like to open a new mental health facility for teenagers. There is someone who provides pro bono legal work for women who have found themselves in dire straits. And there's also some people who are working towards helping with substance use disorder. Some of these community partners, I'm not going to list them publicly right now, but you know who they are, and we would encourage them to apply through an application process that we would have community partners sitting on a committee to review, and most likely also counselors to review these applications to decide the best way to grant this money out. And there's actually, interestingly, a webinar that's being held by a national organization next week about how municipalities can best work through processes to grant ARPA funds to community partners. So we do have some people in the city who will be attending that webinar so that we can accurately structure that process. The last one I believe on here is the 500,000 small business revolving loan fund with a focus on women and BIPOC-owned businesses. We have found that these small businesses, specifically women and BIPOC-owned businesses, have still not fully recovered and need a lot more support. We are looking to structure a revolving loan fund that is close to zero, if not 0% interest. And as a way to help these businesses either expand or stabilize, or in some cases start if we see we have a need for that. There is a national partner called Kiva, which has been well renowned for helping municipalities structure these programs, and they help them process the loans and ensure that it's a 0% financing structure for the borrower. That's just to let you know where we're headed when we're thinking about structuring that project.
Excellent. If we move forward with all of that, that would leave us about 3.8 million for FY24. And the proposed uses are, as you know, the mayor had committed to $5 million for housing and houselessness. So that $2 million is the money that was obligated in FY23. We are planning and hoping that things will continue to improve revenue-wise, but we have included a $1 million as opposed to $2 million revenue replacement reserve, again, used only if needed. And as mentioned, the $800,000 in equity investments as we're phasing those into the structural budget.
Important point to, maybe you've already reinforced this, but I think there's a significant chance that the funds still available in FY24 will grow if we don't need to spend down all of the revenue replacement reserve, for example, or if there are a number of other areas where we may not spend the full amount that's been committed and allocated so far. So that's sort of a minimum of what
That's
will
right.
remain to be allocated for FY24.
Yeah, and as a refresher, we're not obligated to encumber these funds until the end of calendar year 2024. So we still have time to assess, and we'll see, the revenue replacement piece. We have time to see if we'll need to set it up.
Which I think does sort of tie back a little bit to discussion we're just having about why we're a little bit bullish on spending down to the 10% on the assigned funds. Okay.
Can you expand? Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Councilor Jan, go ahead.
Can you go back to the slide about the 23? Yep, there is one slide, please. Okay, yeah, this one. Now the community infrastructure through RFP process and the targeted high impact grant. Can you develop more on each and what are the differences?
Yes, so if this were to be approved through our budget process right now, we would still need to come to Board of Finance and City Council with more details around this. Our thinking around the community infrastructure piece is that those who responded to the survey, particularly those who identified as BIPOC, felt that it would be beneficial for the city to invest funds in community infrastructure. So we are talking about a place where one can gather, listen to music, maybe have pop-up dinners, and be able to perhaps take classes, things of that sort. Now, we don't have enough of this ARPA funds to renovate or build that sort of community infrastructure on our own. So a lot of what municipalities are doing with these ARPA funds are leveraging them either through grants that maybe they already have in other departments or leveraging them through public-private partnerships. And this is what the city would do, would be to bring up to $2 million to the table for projects that could either be on public lands or on private lands. And that's how we envision structuring that process. The targeted high impact grants, I currently have an ongoing list of at least, I would say 15 to 20 community partners who are looking for smaller amounts of funds to stabilize or expand some of the work that they're already doing in the community. And we would open this to a widely advertised application process, and we would convene a committee of residents, stakeholders, counselors to review these applications and discuss how best to award the grants.
Okay. And what about constituent services? What is it?
So constituent services is actually an expansion and also a solidification of our RRC, our Recovery Resource Center that we launched during the pandemic. We found that, and not just us, many municipalities found that their ability to communicate with their constituents on a wide variety of things. Obviously, during the pandemic, that was focused on health and vaccine-related issues. And now there has been a real push to solidify a structure within municipalities so that there can be a flow of information from constituents to the city. And it could be for anything, any of needs you have. Maybe you're worried you're going to be evicted. Maybe there's another wave of the pandemic that we need to get information out to you. Maybe we need information in multiple languages. It's a way to facilitate the interaction and the flow of information between our residents and ourselves.
Yep, and also I'm assuming that this is not for individuals, all of them, community infrastructure or the impact grant, you know, but it's to organizations that are already
It's for
established.
organizations, correct.
Wonderful. All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course.
And I think it's been stated and probably clear anyway, but just in case it's worth restating, it's, I think, important to remember all these proposals are grounded in the work that Cara did with the public engagement, between surveys and public meetings, throughout much of 2020, calendar year 2021, and then the discussions that we had in the early part of this year with the prior council and the really the prior council. This is really the first time we've talked with the councils to the table.
Yeah, I think so, yes.
So hopefully it didn't, the connection back to the work here was clear tonight. I'm looking online and not seeing any further hands at this point or in the room. So we are going to close this presentation. Thank you very much, Cara. And we will now at 7:37 adjourn the budget meeting. And
so if I had the forethought, I would have just used this same
Yeah.
Zoom for the next meeting, but I was not properly thinking ahead. So everyone should have a Zoom invite in your, or a Zoom link in your inboxes from me from around 3:30, I think is when I sent it. So you'll have to.
but don't do that yet, because we should have an open session first.
For the open session.
Yeah.
So there's this Zoom, there's another Zoom for an open session, and then
And then
yet a
another
third Zoom.
Zoom.
Got it.
It's gonna be great.
All right, so did everyone, sorry, I wasn't following that. Did everyone else understand that? Can you say it again, Jordan, to make sure everyone
Okay,
understands it?
so if you're on this Zoom and you're planning to join the executive session, please click out of this Zoom and look at the most recent email from me with an updated Zoom for the public part of the meeting before we go into executive session. Whew.
Excellent, everyone's off.
you.